My name is Richard Calloway, and I am 63 years old. For 4 decades, my job was finding what people hid inside their numbers. I never imagined that one day those same skills would be turned on my own family. I was running 20 minutes late to Thanksgiving dinner at my daughter's house. The traffic on I-95 had been brutal, and I remember thinking she would give me grief about it. The gentle, affectionate kind of grief that daughters give fathers when they know the fathers will laugh it off. I pulled into their cul-de-sac and noticed the driveway was already packed with cars. Her neighbors' sedans, her college friends' SUVs, and right there in the center of the driveway, gleaming under the motion sensor light like something from a magazine spread, sat a brand new silver Porsche Cayenne. The sight of it made my stomach tighten in a way I couldn't immediately explain. I filed the feeling away. Old habit. I came around the side of the house because the front door always sticks in cold weather. My daughter knew this. She'd been meaning to fix the weather stripping for 2 years. The side door off the kitchen was unlocked, and I pushed it open quietly, the warmth and noise of the party washing over me immediately. Music, laughter, the smell of her mother's stuffing recipe, the one I'd taught her from memory. My son-in-law was standing in the center of the living room with a glass of red wine raised high. He had that look he always wore at gatherings, the one where he believed every eye in the room existed specifically to admire him. He's a broad-shouldered man, my son-in-law, the kind of man who was handsome at 25 and has been coasting on it ever since, adding a layer of entitlement with every passing year. "To this table," he announced, his voice carrying over the music. Someone turned it down. To the people who actually showed up, a few people chuckled. Someone from the back called out, "What about your father-in-law, Marcus? Is the old man coming?" My son-in-law's face broke into a grin. Not a warm grin, the kind of grin that's really just a sneer with better manners. "Richard?" He let the name sit there for a moment. "You know how it is." He probably got confused and drove to the wrong house. Happens at that age. Laughter. Genuine, open laughter, from people who had shaken my hand and eaten my daughter's cooking at gatherings I'd paid for. Honestly, Thanksgiving's better without him hovering around. Man walks in a room and the temperature drops 10 degrees. More laughter. And then I saw her. My daughter was sitting at the edge of the couch, a wine glass in her own hand. She looked at my son-in-law with an expression that was not quite pride and not quite discomfort. She gave a small shake of her head, the way you'd correct a child who's being cute, but slightly too loud. "Marcus, come on," she said, and then she smiled. She actually smiled. I was standing in the kitchen doorway. No one had seen me. The cold from outside was still in my coat. I didn't feel anger. I've had too many years of training for anger to be the first thing I feel. What I felt was clarity. A cold, clean, precise clarity. The kind that arrives when a pattern finally resolves itself into something you can see completely. I stepped back out the side door. I pulled it shut behind me without a sound. I walked back to my car, a 10-year-old Ford Taurus that runs perfectly and has been paid off since the second Obama administration. I sat in the driver's seat in the dark and thought about the Porsche Cayenne in the driveway. My son-in-law manages a real estate investment fund. That's the official version of what he does. He raises money from private investors, mostly retirees, mostly people who trusted someone who trusted him, and he pools it into residential development projects in the Southeast. High returns, he promises them. Consistent. Safe as houses, he likes to say, and he says it like it's original. My daughter met him at a charity gala in Atlanta 5 years ago. She was 31. She'd been doing well for herself, a project manager at a healthcare company, her own apartment, her own car. Sensible, sharp. Within 18 months of meeting him, she had quit her job, moved into his house, and started referring to his opinions as her own. I have a son-in-law who never calls me dad. He calls me Richard when he's being civil and the old man when he thinks I'm not listening. He has made exactly 2 comments about my home in the 7 years I've known him. The first was when I showed him the house where I'd raised my daughter 3 bedrooms, paid off, in a good school district in suburban Raleigh, and he said, "This is charming, very retro." The second was when he suggested I consider downsizing, as if the house I'd lived in for 30 years was a problem to be solved. I didn't correct him either time. It was easier to let him believe I was a simple man. The call had come 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I was reviewing my quarterly statements, an old habit, Tuesday evenings. Systematic when my daughter's name lit up my phone. Her voice was the voice she uses when she needs something. I recognized it immediately. I'd heard it the first time when she was 16 and wanted to borrow my car. It's a half octave higher than her normal voice, a little breathless, a little more generous with the warmth. Daddy. She hadn't called me Daddy since college. I need to talk to you about something exciting. I waited. Marcus has a new phase of the fund opening up. The returns are incredible. We're talking 12, 13% annually. Guaranteed. A few of his best investors are rolling over their positions and there are 2 spots left. He wanted me to call you personally because family gets priority. I asked her how much. The minimum is $200,000. I was quiet for a long moment. $200,000. My entire liquid savings, scraped together over 40 years of a government salary, careful investments, and the life insurance policy her mother had left behind. Sweetheart, I said. I don't think I can do that. The warmth in her voice dropped out like a trapdoor opening. I thought you'd want to support us. This is our future, Daddy. Our family's future. A pause. Or is that just not something you're willing to do? I told her I'd think about it. She said she needed an answer by the end of the week. She hung up before I could say anything else. We hadn't spoken again. The Thanksgiving invitation had arrived by text. 3 lines. No warmth. A summons, dressed as an invitation. Now I sat in the dark outside their house, listening to the faint sound of conversation and music bleeding through the windows. The Cayenne sat in the driveway under the motion sensor light. New plates. Current registration sticker. That car cost $130,000 minimum. I know because I looked it up that same night she called me, after I'd stood in my kitchen and felt the unease settle into something harder. I drove home. My house was quiet in the way that houses get quiet after children leave and spouses die. Not empty full of things, full of memory, but quiet in a way you eventually stop fighting. I made coffee. I sat at my desk, the same oak desk I'd had since 1987, the one Margaret said looked like it belonged in a government building. She was right. It did. I'd kept it for exactly that reason. I opened the bottom drawer. Inside, beneath a manila folder of old pay stubs, was a leather credential wallet. The leather had softened with age, curved to the shape of my palm. I opened it. On one side, a gold badge. On the other, a laminated identification card with a photograph of a younger, thinner version of myself and the words, Richard Calloway, Special Agent, IRS Criminal Investigation Division, Financial Crimes Unit, 38 years. That's how long I spent tracing money. Not collecting taxes, tracing money. Following it through shell companies and offshore accounts, through fake invoices and layered wire transfers, through the complicated architecture that people build when they want to make dirty money look clean or make clean money disappear. I was the agent they called when the paper trail was the only witness still breathing. My supervisor used to say I could read a balance sheet the way a surgeon reads an X-ray. I retired 4 years ago at the mandatory age. My son-in-law thought I had spent my career pushing paper in a cubicle. He had made the mistake that undisciplined people always make. He had looked at a quiet man and assumed the quiet meant nothing was going on underneath it. I set the credential wallet on the desk next to my coffee and picked up my phone. Not my regular phone, the prepaid one I'd kept in the back of my desk drawer since my last year on the job, a holdover from cases where operational security required a clean line. It had 4 contacts in it. My attorney, my former supervisor at the field office, a forensic accountant named Carol Huang, who had been the best analyst I'd ever worked alongside, and a number marked simply as Daniel's a contact at FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, who owed me a significant professional favor. I called Carol first. She picked up on the 3rd ring. It was almost midnight. Richard Calloway, she said, without surprise, as if she'd been expecting me eventually. I figured it would be a holiday. I told her what I needed. A full financial profile on Marcus Elliott Webb, asset disclosures, credit history, SEC filings for the fund, Any suspicious activity reports, anything she could pull through channels that wouldn't flag his name before I was ready. A long pause. I could hear her tapping a pen against something. How fast? I need something by morning. Another pause. You know this isn't my actual job anymore, right? You know I wouldn't call if it weren't serious. She exhaled. What's his fund called? Meridian Real Estate Capital Partners. The tapping stopped. I heard her chair move. I know that name, she said, and her voice had changed. Send me everything you have. I'll call you before 6. I didn't sleep. I made more coffee. I sat at my desk and thought about my daughter at 7 years old, teaching herself to read because she was impatient for me to come home and read to her. I thought about her at 16, arguing with me about curfews with the same precision and stubbornness that would later make her excellent at her job. I thought about her at 28, holding her mother's hand in that hospital room, not crying, because she knew her mother didn't want her to cry. I thought about what Margaret had said to me in the last week before the end. Watch out for her, Richard. She's strong, but she doesn't always know it yet. Carol called at 5:47 inches the morning. Sit down, she said. I told her I was already sitting. Meridian Real Estate Capital Partners has not filed a required Form D with the SEC in 14 months. Their last audited financial statement was submitted with numbers that do not reconcile with their publicly stated investor returns. I'm looking at a projected gap between reported performance and actual asset value of roughly $4 to $6 million. A pause. Richard, I ran a quick FinCEN query through a contact. There are 2 SARS, suspicious activity reports, already on file for Meridian. Someone at a regional bank flagged unusual wire activity 8 months ago. The case is open but hasn't been assigned yet. It's just sitting there. My hand tightened around the phone. There's more. Your son-in-law has a Delaware LLC formed 14 months ago. It's called Web Capital Holdings. The registered agent is your daughter. She's listed as the sole managing member. The coffee in my mug went cold while I sat there. That LLC received a series of deposits over the past year, 43 transfers, all under $10,000. Classic structuring pattern. Total amount deposited, just over $380,000. The money came in from investor accounts in Meridian, transferred through a middleman account in the Caymans, and landed in Web Capital as what appears to be a management fee arrangement. Except the fee agreement doesn't exist. I looked. I closed my eyes. Richard. Carol's voice was careful. Careful, the way it gets when she's about to say something that has a personal dimension. Your daughter signed the LLC formation documents. She signed the bank account opening agreements. Under federal statute, she is the controlling party of an account that received what appears to be commingled investor funds. That's not just civil exposure. That's potential wire fraud. I asked the question I already knew the answer to. Does she know? A long silence. That's the question, isn't it? After I hung up, I stood at my kitchen window for a long time. The sky over Raleigh was getting light. It was Thanksgiving morning. I knew what my son-in-law had built. I had seen it 100 times in 38 years, in variations small and enormous, in schemes run by men in expensive suits out of glass offices and by men in back rooms out of folding tables. The architecture was always the same. You raise money on a promise. You pay early investors with late investor money to create the appearance of returns. You siphon a portion into a parallel structure, a company, an LLC, a family member's account to protect your exit funds. And when the structure begins to collapse, you need one more infusion to buy yourself time to disappear. $200,000. My money. My name on a subscription agreement for a fund that was already bleeding out. But the Cayenne. That's what kept coming back. You don't buy a $130,000 vehicle when you're desperately soliciting capital from your father-in-law. You buy it when someone has given it to you, when it's compensation, when there's someone above you in the chain who wants you comfortable and compliant. I called Daniels at FinCEN at 7 in the morning. He picked up immediately. I gave him the case numbers Carol had referenced, the 2 existing SARs, and told him what I had. He was quiet for a moment. You're retired, Richard. I know. So this is a citizen tip. That's right. From a citizen who happens to have spent 4 decades running financial fraud cases. Purely coincidental. I heard him smile. I'll make some calls. Keep your phone on. What followed was the hardest part of any investigation. The waiting. The space between knowing and acting, where you have nothing but your own certainty to keep you company. I drove back to my daughter's neighborhood at noon. The party was long over. The street was quiet. My son-in-law's Cayenne sat in the driveway. I parked 4 houses down and watched. The motion sensor light over the garage had burned out. Another detail he hadn't gotten around to. Appearances matter to men like him, but only the large-scale ones. The details always slip. An hour passed. Then the front door opened, and my son-in-law came out with a gym bag over his shoulder and a rolling carry-on behind him. He loaded both into the Cayenne without any particular hurry, the casual speed of a man who has thought this through and believes he has time. He backed out of the driveway. I called my daughter. She picked up on the first ring, and when she heard my voice, her own voice broke immediately, the way a surface breaks when the pressure underneath has been building for a long time. Daddy, not the performance version. The real one. Daddy, something's happening. There are emails. Investors are asking questions. And Marcus says it's fine, but he's been on the phone all morning. And I know, I said. Listen to me carefully. I need you to look out the front window and tell me if his car is still there. A pause. Footsteps. Then, he's gone. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. He said he was going to the gym. He didn't. He took his bag. He took the big suitcase. Daddy, he took. She stopped. He left without telling me. I looked at my rearview mirror. The Cayenne was already out of sight. Sweetheart, I said, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to the whole thing before you respond. I told her about the LLC in her name. I told her about the structuring. I told her about the SARs and the audit gap and what Carol had found. I told her in the same methodical way I'd briefed prosecutors for 38 years, clear and sequential, leaving no room for misunderstanding. I told her about the $200,000 and what her husband had actually intended to do with my money and my name. The silence on the other end was so complete, I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then she said, very quietly, I signed things he gave me. He said it was administrative, tax efficiency. I didn't read them. I trusted him. A pause. That was stupid. It was. I said. I didn't soften it. She didn't need softening right now. She needed clarity. But stupid is different from criminal, and the difference matters. What happens next depends entirely on what you do in the next 4 hours. I called my former supervisor's cell. He was at his son's house for Thanksgiving. He stepped outside to talk to me. I gave him the plate number on the Cayenne and the 2 probable destinations, the Interstate Southwest toward Charlotte Douglas Airport or Northeast toward RDU. I told him what Daniels had confirmed about the open FinCEN case. He said, give me 20 minutes. He called back in 11. There's a bolo going out. Wire fraud and securities violations, flight risk. The U.S. Marshals will coordinate with local law enforcement at both airports. Then I called my son-in-law's cell. He answered on the second ring, and I could hear the highway behind him. Richard. His voice was careful but still coated with that particular brand of disdain he'd never quite managed to conceal. This really isn't a good time. Where are you going, Marcus? A pause. The highway noise. Heading to a meeting. Investment thing. Nothing you'd understand. I think you're heading to Charlotte Douglas. I think you have a ticket to Cancun or Panama City, something with a weak extradition relationship, booked under a name close enough to your own to board without triggering immediate flags. And I think you believe you have approximately a 4-hour window before anyone starts looking. The highway noise continued. His breathing changed. You thought I was a retired paper pusher, I said. You thought 38 years in federal service meant 38 years of filing forms in a gray building. You've been calling me the old man since the first year you were with my daughter, and you meant it as a small, private insult that you could keep forever. I let you keep it because it was useful. A man who underestimates you is a man who gets careless. Richard, I don't know what you think I was a special agent with IRS criminal investigation for 38 years, Marcus. Financial Crimes Unit. I ran 41 cases to conviction. Every one of them was a man who believed his structure was smarter than the people looking for it. You are not the most sophisticated scheme I have ever seen. You are, in my professional assessment, somewhere in the bottom third. I let that sit. The FinCEN case that has been sitting unassigned for 8 months has now been assigned. The 2 suspicious activity reports filed against Meridian have been flagged as active. A BOLO has been issued for your vehicle. You will not make it through security at Charlotte Douglas. You will not make it through security at RDU. You will be detained, and the federal charge on which you are detained will come with a bail recommendation that reflects flight risk. Nothing from his end, just the sound of a car moving through space. But here's what I want you to understand, I continued, and I kept my voice as level as I would have kept it in any interview room in any federal building over the past 4 decades. My daughter's name is on that LLC. My daughter signed those bank documents. If you run, if you disappear, if you make this a fugitive matter, the investigation that follows will have no incentive to distinguish between a woman who was manipulated and a woman who was complicit. The story gets simpler when the primary subject isn't available to tell it. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? A very long silence. If you turn around, I said. If you drive back to that house, and you call the attorney whose number I'm about to text you a federal defense attorney, not some real estate lawyer, and if you begin cooperating before the agents make contact with you, there is a version of this, where my daughter is treated as a victim of your conduct, and not a co-conspirator. That version disappears the moment you cross a checkpoint. I heard the signal of a turn indicator, a lane change, the deceleration of a car moving toward an exit. The attorney's name is Weston Blair, I said. Tell him Richard Calloway sent you. He'll know what it means. I ended the call. I sat in my car on a quiet street in North Carolina on Thanksgiving afternoon, with my hands resting in my lap, and I thought about Margaret and about the particular kind of love that expresses itself not through rescue but through refusal to enable, and I thought that she would understand what I had done and why. My son-in-law was taken into federal custody at a gas station off I-85 40 minutes later. He had apparently pulled over, made several phone calls, and then called 911 himself. Weston Blair met him at the processing center that evening and began cooperation discussions before the weekend was over. The Meridian case took 11 months to fully develop. It involved 47 individual investors, a fraud amount of $6.2 million, and a network of fee-siphoning arrangements that my son-in-law had been running for 4 years. The Cayenne had been purchased with investor funds. It was seized. My daughter cooperated fully. She gave federal investigators every document, every email, every text message she had access to. She retained her own attorney, a young woman at a firm in downtown Raleigh who was direct and thorough and negotiated a resolution that recognized her as a materially deceived party. She received a deferred prosecution agreement. She will carry its conditions for 3 years. She sold the engagement ring and 4 designer handbags within the first month and moved into an apartment that she pays for herself. She came to see me 6 weeks after everything unraveled. It was a Thursday evening in January. She knocked on my front door in the careful, hesitant way of someone who isn't sure they have the right anymore to knock at all. I opened the door and I stood in the frame without stepping back. She looked the way people look when they have cried so many times they've arrived at a place past crying, a dry, clear-eyed kind of grief. She was wearing her old coat, the practical one from before. She had no makeup on. She looked more like her mother in that moment than she had in years. Dad, not Daddy, not the performance voice. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I didn't say anything. I waited. I wanted you to know that I understand what you did, and why, and I understand if you can't. She stopped. She pressed her lips together. I looked at everything he gave me to sign. Dad. I looked at it and I didn't ask questions because I was afraid of what the answers would be, and I told myself that was the same as not knowing. But it wasn't. I knew something was wrong. I knew for a long time. The cold January air moved between us. That woman I was when you walked into that party, she said. She's not who I want to be. She's not who you raised. I looked at my daughter for a long time. I saw the 7-year-old who taught herself to read. I saw the 16-year-old who argued with precision and would not back down. I saw the woman who had held her mother's hand without crying because she knew her mother didn't need tears. She needed presence. I stepped back from the door. I didn't say anything. She understood. She walked inside. I made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table. The same table where she'd done her homework, where she'd eaten 1,000 dinners, where she'd cried the night she found out her mother's diagnosis and I'd told her we would get through it because we always got through it. She sat there with her hands wrapped around a mug, and we talked for a long time, not about what had happened, but about what came next. She'd started looking for project management work. She'd reconnected with a friend from her old company. She was building something, small and careful and honest. Before she left, she stood at the door for a moment. "I'm sorry, Dad." "I know you are," I said. She nodded. She went out to her car, a used Honda Civic she'd bought for cash with money from selling the furniture, and she drove away down my street. I watched the taillights disappear around the corner. Then I went back inside. I sat at my desk. I opened my notebook, the legal pad where I've kept notes on everything, for 40 years. I wrote nothing. I just sat for a while in the quiet house that was full of my life. All the years and furniture and photographs and the particular smell of the wood floors that Margaret always said she loved, and I thought about the words she'd said in the hospital. "Watch out for her. She's strong, but she doesn't always know it yet. Maybe she knows it now. Maybe that's the best any of us can do, arrive, eventually, at a knowledge of ourselves that cost enough that we can't afford to forget it." I closed the notebook. I turned off the desk lamp. The room settled into the good kind of quiet. If you believe that the truth finds its way out eventually, that patience and integrity outlast cleverness and greed, subscribe to this channel. Every story here is about exactly that. And if this one found its way to you, it was probably meant to.